SIG-23, 1 December 2020. This is number 5. Yeah, number 5. There we go. The last article that I just did was on America's moral decay, the cesspool that our country has become culturally and socially. It's a cesspool. It's really all it is. Look at the recent hit from Cardi B. I won't even speak it. And last year, Baby It's Cold Outside was relatively harmless, very harmless song, was excoriated, banned. And yet this year, in the progressive nature of United States culture, we have Cardi B's hit. That's called moral decay. So, with that in mind, I think this is my last one for the day. There's a study that says trans people are suffering because straight people won't date them. A study of transgender individuals and their dating prospects insinuates straight men and women are furthering the suffering of those in the trans community by refusing to go out with them. With the establishment media and the entertainment industry, and even many elected officials have attempted to normalize gender fluidity for several years, most people not in the portion of the population that engages in gender bending haven't bought in. A survey published by Sage Journals in 2018 evaluated the demographic characteristics of individuals who are willing to consider a transgender individual as a potential dating partner. Researchers Karen A. Blair and Rhea Ashley Hoskin asked a pool of 958 participants about hypothetical dating partners. The Canadian researchers asked the participants to check off if they would consider dating a cisgender woman, a cisgender man, a transgender woman, a transgender man, and a person with a non-binary gender identification. In a response that should surprise no one, most people would refuse the idea of dating someone who is transgender. Quote, our results indicated that 87.5% of the participants who were asked this very question only checked off the cisgender options and excluded, I've been up all night, and excluded transgender and non-binary individuals from their hypothetical dating pool, Blair wrote in a 2019 piece published by Psychology Today. Remember what I said about cesspool? Of all respondents, straight men and women were more likely to refrain from entering the idea of dating a transgender person. Quote, individuals identifying as bisexual, queer, trans, or non-binary were most likely to indicate a willingness to date a trans person, the original study found. In her Psychology Today article, Blair stated that by refusing to enter into what technically are gay relationships, straight people are furthering the misery of that part of the population. While Blair said people, apparently even straight individuals, have, quote, the freedom to decide whom they date. Oh, that's mighty freaking magnanimous of you. Their overall aversion to dating people of their own gender who might be convinced they were born in the wrong body is evidence that already embattled transgendered individuals face prejudice. Blair wrote, "Understanding the extent to which trans individuals are excluded from the realm of dating can serve as a benchmark from where society currently stands with respect to including trans and non-binary individuals. It is one thing to make space for diverse gender identities within our own workplaces, schools, washrooms, and public spaces, but it is another to fully include and accept gender diversity within our families and romantic relationships," the researcher added. Ultimately, however, this research underscores the consequences of shared societal prejudices that impact our trans friends, partners, family members, and coworkers on a daily basis. Transgender individuals are more likely to suffer emotionally and consider suicide than many other groups in society, according to a multitude of research on the subject. Reuters Health, for example, reported earlier this year that in the United States, roughly half of transgender teens who identify as male but were so stupid. This is a quote. This is not me. It makes me cringe and want to vomit to even utter this. Roughly half of transgender teens who identify as male but who were assigned a female gender at birth, moral decay, have attempted suicide at least once, the study found. And 42% of adolescents who don't identify exclusively as male or female have had at least one prior suicide attempt. About 30% of trans female teens who identify as female but have birth certificates that label them as male have tried suicide at least once, as have 28% of adolescents who are questioning their gender identity, the study also found, the report noted. While the human suffering is terrible, the social remedy in recent years for the transgender community has more or less been for enablers in culture and medicine to assure these individuals they are validated for believing they were born into the wrong body. At the same time, people who resist such an affront to biology and logic and science and common sense, those who aren't morally decayed, morality and social mores are essentially smeared as being bigoted. Apparently, that would be me. Like I care. Attempts to convince society that a man wearing makeup is not a man have failed, even if that man has surgically altered or removed genitalia. The left's strategy for convincing transgender persons that any mental illness they might have is validated and that the broader society is wrong if they don't agree with that validation appears to be furthering the misery. A wonderful article by a self-described transgender person and published by The Spectator Australia in 2017 made a valid argument against normalizing transgenderism, especially among youths. Quote, "We don't normalize having cancer, we don't normalize medical conditions, yet society is normalizing transgenderism, which trivializes my grief and pain," end quote. Argued a transgender individual using the handle Libby Down Under. Quote, "While I'm grateful that the stigma has significantly diminished in recent years, I am disturbed by the social normalization and demedicalization of transgenderism. Despite receiving the best ongoing medical treatment for just gender dysphoria I could ever ask for, my dysphoria still causes me grief and pain. But that's my grief and pain to carry, and it's the responsibility of adults to deal with the struggles of life," Libby Down Under added. Individuals struggling with Identity disorders in regard to their gender are being set up for disappointment once they leave the safety of an echo chamber that validates them. Most people, by and large, arguably would show compassion to a fellow human being suffering from a mental health crisis. But the majority aren't willing to ignore their own values, hormones, and sexual orientation with regard to dating in order to accommodate someone who's struggling with their identity. I can sympathize. I can. And I do. I do. As far as someone who wants to date a male who wants to date a transgender woman, a male, or a woman who wants to date a transgender man, a female, for me, that's not my business. But I don't care. I don't care. In general, be happy, people. Try and be happy with who you are and what you are, whatever. But I draw the line at normalizing societally and culturally the behavior. It falls far outside of natural societal bounds. It simply does. I don't know how else to put it. To me, it's simply logic and common sense. I don't object. I don't care if someone wants to date someone of the opposite sex, if someone wants to, join in a civil union. I won't call it a marriage. But I don't care if someone wants to join in a civil union with someone of the same sex. Even if they're joining in a civil union with someone of the same sex who is supposedly transgendered, they've transitioned into the opposite sex, which quite frankly is impossible. But if you can find happiness there, have at it. I object, and I draw the line at saying that this is how all of society how all of society should be patterned. Moral decay and rot. We are living those times, people. We are living those times. 623 out.